Welcome to Season 2 of the Making Bank podcast, where we continue our exploration of South Florida's entrepreneurial landscape with host Keith Costello, co-founder and CEO of Locality Bank. Sit back, relax, and let South Florida visionaries guide you on an entrepreneurial journey from tribulation to triumph, sharing the very stories that have shaped them.
Beth, Azor, welcome to Locality Bank's Making Bank podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're really excited about having Beth with us today. Not only has she had a very successful career in real estate, but now she's taken her show on the road. She's helping other people. She's doing seminars and all over the country. And so that's so exciting. So there's really a lot to talk about with Beth. But we usually like to start out, Beth, right from your early beginnings and, tell us where you grew up and what your family was like when you grew up.
Sure. I grew up in Wisconsin until I was a teenager. My parents were entrepreneurs. Just like the Cheers bar, we had a bar that we inherited from my grandparents. And my dad worked at a brewery. And actually, my mom was the executive assistant of the owner of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Wow.
So they had two jobs the whole time that I was growing up. And then, so I learned a lot from them regarding work ethic. We moved to Florida when I was a teenager, and they got into residential real estate.
Interesting. So where did you move to when you moved to
Flagler
Florida?
Beach, which is between Daytona and St. Augustine.
We were just there.
Really?
It's a cool, funky beach town. If
Absolutely.
you haven't been there, it's really an interesting place.
When I moved there, we had there was one commercial building, a Pizza Hut. There was one convenience store. There were 4,000 people in the whole county. My high school was 7th through 12th grade, and my senior class when we graduated had 82 people.
Wow.
So anytime, I was a cheerleader and, maybe once in a while we would, leave school. My parents are like, "Why are you out of school?" Because everyone knew everyone. It was definitely a small town.
Well, I guess now the population has climbed to like 5,000. It's still not very big.
At one point, Flagler County for years, multiple years in a row, was the fastest growing county in Florida.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Palm Coast is right next to it.
Okay.
And so ITT developed Palm Coast. And I think there's thousands and thousands of people now. Now there's a Home Depot and a TJ Maxx. I mean, it's really blossomed.
But Flagler Beach itself
it's
is
still small, right? It's
definitely
because geographically it's small.
Yeah, but very beautiful place. And great place to grow up. So what were your parents doing in residential real estate?
So my dad bought and sold homes, and my mom was the number one property manager for absentee condo owners. So she probably had over 100 condos that people owned from all over the country that she rented for them for summer rentals, long-term rentals, and her license plate said prop manager. So she was the go-to person if you came to Flagler and you wanted to rent during season a condo for 3 months or in the summer for a couple of weeks. Everyone would say, "Go see June."
Wow. And so, and that's a big business there. Obviously, that's what we just did. We rented I did an Airbnb up there. And so so your parents had jobs before, and then they came to Florida. Obviously, your mom was working for the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah.
How did she transition into these other roles?
My dad was a dreamer.
Okay.
And my dad, as they owned the bar, this was not a lifestyle that he loved. Getting up, cleaning the bar, opening the bar. There was a restaurant component. They'd go to sleep at 2:00 in the morning. I mean, it was just a crazy life. But he grew up in that because his parents were in that. And so at some point in Milwaukee, he got his real estate license, and he sat at the dining room table cold calling from the white pages. I know you know what that is, right?
I did it.
The listeners probably don't know. And he would just cold call, and he worked for ITT where they had lots in Florida, and you could pay the $500 down, $50 a month. And when you retired, you could build a home in Florida. And he sold those from Wisconsin. He would go sit in people's living room, and then they would go on these trips where they would bring them down to the hotel in Flagler Beach or Palm Coast, and they'd show them the lots, the people who invested. So he fell in love with the area. And he went and said to my mom, this is a rat race. Why are we doing this? Why are we living and scraping the ice off of the windshields of our car for 6 months of the year? Let's move to Florida. And they owned a couple businesses, a bunch of real estate. So they were in the position at 37-ish to say, let's just sell everything and move to Florida.
Wow.
Which I benefited from as a teenager because, I got to go move to a beach town and get out of, a snowy. My freshman class in Milwaukee was 800 kids.
Wow.
And I moved to a place where my class was 80. So I did everything. I was a cheerleader. I was the pitcher of the softball team. When you have such a small class, the coach came to me in the lunchroom and said, "You look like you could play softball. Come to the practice today." You did everything. So from kind of being a wall, standing on the sidelines of a class of 800 in Milwaukee, now I could be a leader and be very involved in Florida. It was great.
And did you get involved in the businesses that they were running?
I was always the kid. So my parents when my dad would sell homes to people, there would inevitably be families where they'd say, "I'm not sure how my kids are going to like moving." And I'd get the phone call, "Hey, what are you doing? Can you come up to the office? We have some parents that want to talk to you."
Wow.
As a 14, 15, 16-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And I would drive up and I'd say, what questions do you have? It's been the best thing ever that we moved to Florida.
Wow.
And sometimes they'd have me talk to their kids. And so I was part of the sales process.
So you were closing deals at a young age.
Absolutely.
That's great.
And then when I was 18, if you are a member of a family that are in the real estate business, at 18, you get your license. So I was a freshman at Florida State, and my summer between my freshman year and my sophomore year, I got my license, and I sat open houses for them all through college during summers. I would work in the business.
Wow. So I noticed at FSU, your major, I think, was English, though,
English
right?
literature.
Yeah.
I thought I'd be a lawyer.
Okay, interesting.
And
You want to be a lawyer?
Yeah, and then after 4 years of school, I'm like, I don't really want to keep going to school. I want to make money.
And so then what'd you do when you graduated?
So I had an English literature and communications degree. So I got a job for my first job out of school. I was in a sorority at FSU. And
Which
I got
one?
Phi Mu.
Okay, I'm asking only because my daughters were all Delta Gammas.
Got it. And so I was a chapter consultant. So I traveled around the country for the sorority, my first job out of school, which is fabulous. But then I came down to Miami, followed a boy, and I got a job as a special events coordinator for the Heart Association in Miami, which I loved my job. So PR, special events, but I made $11,000 a year. So guess what I did on the weekends?
Sold real estate. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and after 2 years I got my $11,000 salary jumped to a whopping 23, but I was making more on the weekends doing real estate. And so my executive director of the charity came to me and said, "We love you, but your ambition exceeds us." And she goes, "I don't really make more than the 23 and I'm the executive director. You should go do this real estate thing full time and just come volunteer for us and be on our board."
Yeah. And donate.
And donate and run the events as a volunteer.
Exactly.
And that's what I did.
And so when you said you were doing real estate, what were you exactly doing?
So sitting model homes up in Parkland, like for developers, because I could do that on the weekends.
Yeah.
Their busiest days, right? Saturdays and Sundays, sitting open houses, sitting model homes. When people would walk in, talk to them about the homes. I think they paid me $50 a day, which that's $400 extra a month. When you're making $23,000, that's great change.
Yeah.
And then I started doing more where they say, well, if any of the deals that of the people you meet with on the weekends close during the week, we'll give you percentages.
Wow.
And so that started adding up.
So, and then where does that go?
So when I went to work for the developer, and I went from working 7 days a week to 5, sitting in a model home reading People magazine. And I hated it. I was so bored. And I went to the developer and I said, "We need to have events. We need to bring people in." And he's like, no, we build luxury homes. People will just walk in the door. Just read People magazines until someone walks in the door. And I was ready to jump off of a building. I was so upset because I said I didn't go to college to do this. And I just felt like I sold out for the man, right? I just said for money. This was a bad decision. I loved my job at the heart, but I wasn't making enough money. And one weekend we had someone come in and help us because it was Mother's Day weekend. We thought we were going to have a big rush. And a woman said, "You need to do what I do." And I go, "Well, what's that?" She goes, "I work for a retail developer and I help fill vacancies in shopping centers." And I said, "Tell me more." And she said, "We build grocery store anchored shopping centers and then we fill the vacancies next to them. So the bagel shop, the dry cleaner, the insurance office, the nail salon, and you help people fulfill their American dream. And when you do that, you are part of their family for the rest of their life. You get invited to every wedding, bar mitzvah." And I'm like, sold. I love this idea. I want to help people fulfill their American dream.
Wow.
And she said, there's a company in Miami called Terra Nova. And they have a training program. They train people to be leasing agents. That's what this job is called. And so I called down to Terra Nova and I said, "Do you guys have a training program for leasing people?" They said, "Yes." And I go, "Who do I talk to?" And they said, "This woman by the name of Donna Abood." And I said, "Did she go to Florida State?" Like, yeah, she went to Florida State. I go, "She was my sorority sister."
Wow.
So she picked up the phone and she said, "Beth from Florida State?" I said, "Yep." And she goes, "You're hired. Just come meet the boss."
Wow.
And 18 years later, I was there. I became the president.
And who was the boss at the time?
Stephen Batel.
Who is still
the boss.
Yeah.
Still the founder and the boss.
Wow. That's a great story. I never knew that. And the sorority sister connection. Wow.
Is that crazy?
So you started out and then over an 18-year career, when did you become the president?
In 12 years in.
12 years
so
in.
He had started talking to me about it 9 years in. And I'm like, I never want to be the president. I'm very happy with you being the president. I have zero interest in being the president.
Yeah.
But he had an opportunity with a fund to give him $300 million to go buy gas stations around the country. And the only way they were going to do that is if someone took over Terra Nova. Mm-hmm. So, he made me a deal I couldn't refuse to become the president. So,
okay.
And he said, it's only for 2 years. And six years later, but it was great. I'm glad I did it. I learned a lot. I couldn't read a P&L when I became the president. And I learned that very quickly, that you're doing more than selling when you're running the company. I was a great salesperson, but now I was a good leader, but I didn't understand all that went into it. And as entrepreneurs, you need to know a lot more. You need to know how to sell. And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs don't know that piece. They focus on all of the other pieces. And so I had to learn a lot on the job. It was a great experience.
Great advice for entrepreneurs. But so you knew how to sell, but you learned the finance piece, which is critical too.
I didn't know how to read our financial statements.
Right.
And he said, you need to spend every day an hour with the CFO. And the CFO needs to learn to tell you no. So we had the wrong CFO when I first joined as the president, but we got the right one. And the right one needed to tell me no and needed to teach me how to read the financial statements. And I learned quickly, but I had just never been exposed to that before. I didn't have to.
Right.
I was busy bringing in business, hiring people, all things very important. But when you're the leader, you have to know the other stuff.
So it's fascinating that in such a male-dominated industry that you were able to rise to the top of, what is a very well-known real estate company here in South Florida. So tell us what that was like and how you were able to do that.
So I was blessed that he was gender blind. He was focused on smarts. If you were smart and if you had ambition, I'd go to him and say, I think, I'm leasing C&D type properties. I want to lease Publix anchored centers. He goes, well, go get them. And I go, well, how do I do that? He goes, well, this is what I would do. And then I would go get them. He's like, I want to sell shopping centers. The commissions on selling shopping centers is way more than leasing them. He goes, well, go sell one. Well, how do I do that? And he would tell me how to do it. And then I would go do it. So he believed in work ethic. He believed in smarts, creativity, sense of urgency. And I was able to deliver all of that. So he had more women at the top than men.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was completely gender blind, and I benefited greatly from that. I didn't realize, I knew I was in a male dominated industry, but because my home base, we were gender blind, I would walk into meetings with such confidence, even though I was the only woman in the room. I just didn't see it. So I hear, I know that women have issues in our industry and other industries that are male dominated, and I always give them advice. I say you need to have confidence. You need to know what you do well, and then and double down on that. And if there's weaknesses, like with me, it was finances, you got to learn from that so that you don't have any insecure feelings. Like I absolutely in the beginning was insecure about that. And I took a class, learning financials for dummies. I did everything I believe that you double down on your strengths, but if you have a weakness that is, crucial to the business, you have to know about that.
Right. Well, that's such good advice, not just for entrepreneurs, but, so you had an interesting career. You were very successful in a corporate environment. And I'm thinking we might need to get Stephen Batel on here. We may ask you to set that up.
Absolutely.
Because it sounds like as somebody running a business that was great that he was gender blind and that he was able to just reward people based on their smarts and their ambition and what they were doing instead of any other discriminatory.
Well, he and I always had a debate about, I went to FSU and he went to it's kind of an Ivy League.
Yeah.
So we would always joke and debate about, I said, Ivies are not, I take the work ethic and the ambition of an FSU Seminole over, a Harvard grad any day. And so we would debate about that all the time. And I said, EQ is almost more important than IQ. So we would have debates. And we used to give all of our employees the Wonderlic. Do you know
Yes.
So we would do the predictive index and the Wonderlic.
Uh-huh.
And he and I agreed very early on that neither one would take the Wonderlic. If I scored much lower than him, he would have a different opinion of me. And vice versa. If he scored lower than me, he wouldn't believe in the test and we would never give it to another employee. So we agreed, 10 years into our relationship that we would never know about the,
Interesting.
But, I helped grow the company because of my EQ.
Yeah.
He's a tough taskmaster. And people say, you were there 18 years? Wow. But I was the people person.
Uh-huh.
And he was the brilliance. The most brilliant person I've ever worked with in my career, and I'm doing this 37 years. Creative and brilliant.
That's great to hear. So how do you then transition? You obviously have got a great relationship with Stephen Batel. You love what you're doing. You're successful. You're probably making great money. How do you decide to go off on your own?
My son was 4. I was a single mom. And I could never outwork Stephen.
Uh-huh.
And so I had to get out of that environment. It was a commitment of 2 years. I was there 6. I felt that I had done what I committed to do. He was not happy that I left. We didn't talk for a long time.
Wow.
Now we're great friends again. But it was definitely, because he thought I could lessen the workload staying there. Take a lesser role. But, that's how do you back off from being the president, right? It would have been super hard. So, but I realized when I had my son at 40 and now my nanny's raising my son at 44. I'm never seeing my son. I'm, driving into the garage at 8:30 and she's shaking her head that he's sleeping. And I had an event where he had a Halloween party at his pre-K school, and I got there late, and I was the last mom. And he's sitting looking outside the glass window for his mom. Mm. And I said, no money in the world, right?
Wow.
No position in the world.
That's really wonderful. I mean, I'm getting a little choked up listening to that, to be honest. I mean, because that's a hard thing. And for a woman in that position, but I also know in my own career, having 4 kids and going through that myself, those are hard choices to make. And
it's impossible because I was divorced. So it was all on me.
Yeah.
It was scary. I was giving up, huge salary, huge future, the private jets. I mean, it was a great package. I had a great position in the industry and a great partner. I loved him and it was a great situation, but my son had to come first.
And any regrets?
No.
I knew you were going to say that.
Not. It was hard. I really valued our Stephen and my relationship. So it was hard in the beginning when he was angry and upset with me because he felt that I, abandoned him. Right.
Right.
But then when my 4-year-old turned 8, I adopted another son. So I have 2 boys.
Great.
Still a single mom. And my boys are everything. And I would have never been able to adopt a son running a company of 125 people. I couldn't have done it.
And how old are the boys now?
23 and 20.
That's awesome.
And they're phenomenal. And I, my son, someone asked my 23-year-old, I think he was like 15. I was somewhere and they're like, what's the biggest thing your mom ever did for you or whatever? And he said, she was my T-ball coach. Like he remembered at 5 years old, I could have never been the T-ball coach if I had a job. Our office was in Miami. I drove every day at 45 minutes, from Fort Lauderdale, from Davie every day, back and forth. So I couldn't be at the Halloween party. So that was the change.
That's awesome. There's a lesson there too. I mean, you can be successful and you can make these choices for your family and still have a great life and still be extremely successful as you've done.
Or successful enough, right? Like
successful enough.
Absolutely. Had I stayed at Terra Nova, I would be worth egads more. But it doesn't matter because I wouldn't have the relationship with I wouldn't have my second son and I wouldn't have the relationship with him that I have.
That's so interesting. Marshall Goldsmith, who you may be familiar with, right? So he says, you should say, what would my 95-year-old self lying in my deathbed say was a good choice? And there's no doubt that as you look back, and even now, as you look back on your life, you can say that's a great choice.
Great choice.
Yep. So you decide to go off on your own. You do the entrepreneurial thing and did it really because of a family decision. And so what did you decide to do?
So I didn't think I was going to do the entrepreneurial thing. I thought I was going to get a job somewhere else working part-time.
Okay.
So I thought my skills and services would be served at a company in retail real estate that I could work 20 or 30 hours a week. That was the goal. But that wasn't available. Everyone wanted me to go run their company and do what I had just done. And I was not interested in that.
You were overqualified.
So I'm like, okay. And I knew during my stint at Terra Nova, I was blessed to have invested as a limited partner in 7 deals with Stephen and other partners. So I knew I wanted to start buying stuff on my own and becoming a GP, a general partner. So I thought, okay, I'm going to start looking for deals to buy. And while I was doing that, my phone started ringing from big companies around the country saying, you just grew a company and trained a bunch of leasing people how to sell. We want you to come teach our leasing team how to do it. And so this whole side hustle training business came out of a demand from companies around the country. We have 4 leasing agents. We just hired them from University of Michigan. They're recent college kids. Come to Michigan and do a week of training. I said, well, I don't want to go to Michigan in January, but if you send them to your Boca office, I'll do I'll do it. And so, because again, I was so focused on being present for my kids, in the beginning, didn't travel a lot.
Right.
So all of a sudden overnight, I realized that there's this demand for training leasing agents. And so I capitalized on that. And I still do that today.
Yeah.
And it's great. And it's blossomed into a lot of different things.
And you've also continued to invest in commercial real estate. And so how did you start going about that?
So the first deal I found was a 1.77 acre piece of land in Davie. I was very familiar with it. We had sold a deal next door, so I knew the price that the seller was asking was a great price. When I was at Terra Nova, I had taken it to Steven saying we should buy this. He said it's too small for us. Okay, so I bought it. And I was going to do 2 ground leases with restaurants. I was negotiating with the restaurants. And then I got Walgreens called. And I'm like, this is off corner, right? You guys really only like to go on corners. Like, yeah, but we can't find anything in the area. So they ended up doing a ground lease. And then their developer called and said, we want to buy it. And I called my partners. I raised money with my partners from friends and family. And I said, we don't want to sell a Walgreens ground lease, right? They go, well, make the price stupid. See if they'll go for it. And I did. And we sold it. And we made 399% on our money in 2 years. So that was my first deal. And all those people keep coming with me. Some deals have been better than others, right? But today I own 5 centers and they're worth about 80 million. I always tell people I own blades of grass because like you're my partner in a deal, right? As my lender. People say, you own $80 million. I go, I know, but I just own blades of grass. I have lenders. I have partners. My sons, when they were younger, used to go to school. We own all these shopping centers across from they would go to St. David's on University Drive, and I have 4 right on University Drive. And my little one said, my mom owns all those shopping centers. And I had to sit him down and teach him about the blade of grass theory.
That's a great concept too. Humility, right?
Oh my gosh. Mario.
Especially in South Florida, that's, and the kids, right? I mean, they
don't tell anyone.
So, I mean, what a great story. And, so obviously we're a bank and we don't usually promote the bank, but I mean, you've dealt with a lot of different banks. So, I mean, can you talk about that as well for people who are involved in working with banks?
Absolutely. And I was very scared of banks. Again, this goes back to women are taught from a very young age, at least in my generation, maybe not your daughter's generation, but in my generation, going to Catholic schools, women are going to be good at English and history. And boys are math and science.
Yeah. And
it's okay if you're not good in math and science, girls. We were taught that. I'm 63. We were taught that in my generation. So my first deal, that 1.77 acres, I'm like, I need a mortgage broker. Because I didn't know how to put together the package. I didn't know what banks to go to. But I said, I'm going to learn how to do this. I'm going to learn to overcome my fear. And it's so important to have people like Drew on your team who, I'm very honest. I always say, what does that mean? Explain that. I don't know amortization. I think I know what it means, but I really want you to explain it. And when you have a lender that will explain it, especially to women, because I think men might also not understand some of the concepts, but sometimes they don't ask. They want to pretend that they know the concepts. And I always tell my women that want to invest, ask the lenders, ask your originators, your loan officers. If you don't know a concept, ask, even if you think you know it, because it's your responsibility, especially if you're raising money from other people. You better know every facet of the loan. And what I found with Drew is, I go, what does that mean again? And he's so he's patient. And I like to do business with people that don't act like it's a burden to explain some of these difficult concepts.
That's great advice.
Even though I own 5 shopping centers, there's things that they bring up that I don't, in the discussion on a term sheet, I'm like, I don't explain exactly what this means.
Right. And I think also for men, there's, you're saying for women, but I think you're right. I think a lot of men are embarrassed to ask.
Absolutely.
But you should ask and you should get those answers that you're looking for. And that's how you learn.
But I've dealt with lenders that are not patient. What do you mean you're asking that? I've had someone say that to me. What do you mean you don't understand that? And I'm not going to do business with them.
Yeah. And believe it or not, maybe they don't know.
And that's exactly why they don't want to explain it.
Right.
I remember at one point someone was talking about swaps. I go, I'm not interested, don't even understand it, can't follow it, forget it, let's move off of it. But a lot of people, I don't care. I can't even, Warren Buffett said only invest with what you can understand.
Right. It's got to be able to be simply explained. And It should be. So, and you wrote a book as well, right?
I wrote 2 books.
2. I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's
So
all right.
tell us about the books that you wrote.
So the first book is called Don't Say No for the Prospect. Because in my world of teaching, and even sons that want to ask girls out for dates, I'm not going to ask because they're probably going to say no. And the whole book is stories on, you're already at no if you don't ask. What the heck? Just go ahead and ask because it might be yes.
Right.
Go ahead and email Mark Cuban and see if he'll invest in the product that you're creating. You never know. Why not ask? So the whole story, people will drive down, look, Locality Bank, what a cool location they have on Andrews Avenue. I have a super cool location on Boca. Well, they're not going to go to Boca because it's so far away. And then the next thing you know, that leasing agent sees a sign, coming soon, Locality Bank, across the street.
Yeah.
So that book is all about that. Just ask the question because you never know. And stories of when I didn't ask, when I did ask, things like that. The second book, so everyone loved that book, but they're like, but that's not the how-to. We want the how-to. So the second book is called The Retail Leasing Playbook. And it's 69 chapters of how to lease a shopping center from day one to, sign leases. And everything that I think a leasing agent should do to be successful. And everyone loves that book because you don't need my training. You can just read the book. Wow.
Yeah. So, and then you taught at FSU as well, right?
So I taught in the summer abroad program in Valencia, Spain. And so I had read a book called The Power of, and I'm going to forget the name. It's Mark Victor Hansen and Power of something. Anyway, and it said do 101 goals. This is way before the bucket list. This is right after I left Terra Nova. I went to a book writing conference and they were the sponsors and they said, write 101 goals. It should take you 20 minutes. It took me like 3 weeks. And the first 30 were easy. And the second 30 were not hard. The third 30 got super much harder. But the last 11 on the list from 90 to 101 were impossible. Like you just started throwing stuff down that was never going to happen, but why not? It would be fun. And in my last 11, I said, be a college professor. And I said, I'm never going to be a college professor. That's not even in the cards. Like, why would I do that? They don't even pay any money. It's like, I'm not, but that would be cool. And I put live in a foreign country with my kids before they turn 16. And 6 months later, I'm up in Tallahassee and someone said, I'm going to teach in London this summer for the summer abroad program. I said, I would love that. He goes, well, you can't do that. That's my gig. And he taught real estate. He goes, but they're looking for someone for Valencia. I said, where's that? I'm thinking it's like Orlando. And they're like, Valencia, Spain. I'm like, oh, I'll do that. And I applied and I was the first non-professor. So I was the first person like in the work world, in the business world to get approved. And I went and we lived in Spain for 6 weeks. My boys were 13 and 10. And we did it for 3 summers in a row. And I taught intro to real estate and I taught professional selling.
Wow.
And I was like, there's such power to writing things down. But the reason I always say the last 11, people say, I tried the 101. I had to stop at 50. It's so important to do all 101 because the last 11, things come out of your subconscious. Like live in a foreign country with my kids before they turn 16. Like, I don't even know where that came from.
Yeah.
But it happened and it changed their lives. Living in Spain for 6 weeks for 3 summers changed all of our lives. I took my sister. We traveled Europe on the weekends. It was phenomenal.
And
I couldn't have done that if I worked at Terra Nova.
Right. And I think actually my daughter, Alexia, I texted her. I think she was in your class.
Yeah, I think she was in my class.
So I'm waiting to hear back from her. But, well, this is great. I mean, anything else? I mean, you've shared a lot about what you've done. Anything else you would offer particularly to entrepreneurs as they look at their lives and their struggles and they're trying to start something?
I think that it's lonely being an entrepreneur. I think it's super important to be part of groups like masterminds. Or like when I was at Terra Nova, I was part of something called Tech, which is now called Vistage. Stephen was part of YPO. I learned so much from being in Vistage, because even though I had a partner, even if you have a partner and even if you have employees, when you're the president, you're alone. Okay. So, and even if you're an entrepreneur and you're the only person, it's kind of like you have informal board of directors. You have people that have done it. I'm always looking, I'm into mastermind groups now. I've been in this for 37 years and I'm in mastermind groups. So I like to work with people or have relationships with people that have done it, something I've done, but they've done it before, so I can learn from them. So I think entrepreneurs need to be part of other groups. I also think where I find a lot of entrepreneurs make mistakes is they don't hire assistants. And if you don't have an assistant, you are the assistant. And I remember when I first left Terra Nova and I was out on my own, I was up at 3:00 in the morning trying to figure out how to do an attachment. I had an executive assistant for 10 of my last 18 years. I did not know how to blackline a document, nothing. And I'm up at 3 a.m. trying, how do I attach a flyer for a prospect for one of my shopping centers? I'm like, I need an assistant. And I, hired the next week, I got someone, Josie, who's still with me today, 20 years later.
Wow.
And I hired her at 20 hours a week. And I said, let me just start part-time. And she's now, my right-hand person. So I think that entrepreneurs make the mistake that they say, I can't afford it. And I'm like, okay, well, if you hire someone for 10 hours a week at $20 an hour, $200, even if you have to go side hustle and sell eBay stuff, do it, because you have to be the person that's doing selling.
Yeah.
They're out there forming systems when they should be selling their product, because without sales, there's no revenue. The systems won't matter.
Yeah.
So I think being part of bigger groups to learn from others, and I think having an assistant at least part-time, when people tell me I can't afford it, I know that they're probably not going to last.
Wow. Yeah. That's really great advice. What mastermind groups are you in now?
I'm in a commercial real estate, one called Commercial Academy. The guys bought and sold a ton of, I only own 5 properties. He probably has 100. And there's 300 people in it from all over the country in all asset classes. So self-storage, hospitality, office, retail, you name it, senior housing. And we have 4 meetings a year. And I get so much out of it because they're talking about, we had a call last night and they were talking about PICs. Something that they did in 2000 and,
pay in kind.
Yeah, pay in kind.
Yeah.
I never heard. So that, and then, when you have a lot of people around the country buying a lot of deals, I don't want to buy 30 more deals. If I buy 5 more and get to 10, I'm good. But if I can learn from other people about things that are going around the country, that's a good thing.
Do you think there'll be, so I have to ask you as a commercial real estate expert, what do you see coming? Do you think there'll be opportunities coming because of what's happening with rates and?
You're the banker. You're supposed to. Right?
I know what I think.
Everyone's like, call all the banks. They have all the deals. Of the 5 deals I own, 3 came from me calling the 85-year-old guy who owned it and talking to him for 3, 5. The deal we own together, you're my lender, I talked to that guy for 5 years. And then on December 2nd, he called me, years ago on December 2nd, said, today's your lucky day. I'm going to sell to you. Here's the problem. You have to close by year end. And I said, okay, well, I can't get a loan in 28 days during Christmas. So you have to sell or finance and then give me a year to refi out. So I think that there are deals at any time in any cycle, but you have to be a hustler and you have to identify what's a good deal and you have to make a deal with the seller. And so I'm working on a deal right now, which is going to be probably the best deal of my career, but I've been working on it for 14 years.
Wow. Great.
So, and look, my parents had a mortgage at 18%.
Yeah.
So 9 or 10%, even though we're not used to it and we hate it, you can make money on 10% mortgages.
It's more normal. And I mean,
Right.
so it's crazy because our kids who grew up in this environment of 0%,
Right.
2 and 3% mortgages, I mean, it's unheard of,
Right.
And as a banker, I mean, for me to have just think about where people complaining about how high rates are, and I'm like, this is normal now.
It's normal, right?
Right.
We've been in an abnormal period,
Yeah.
right? So I believe that I'm an optimist, and I just believe. I was driving here. I was driving around because I got here a little early, and I saw a building. I'm like, oh, this is a great opportunity. So I think you just have to open your eyes, but you have to know your market. I'm not buying stuff all around the country,
Right.
Keith. My 5 shopping centers are 10 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
Like I know my market.
Right.
When something comes available in my town, the town calls me because I've created a monopoly. Like people, like when they think Davie and they think shopping centers, I think my name comes up. So I'm not scattered. I couldn't learn enough about that in all those markets. So and a lot of people do that, but that's not me. I need to really know my stuff.
Sure. That's great. And then in terms of mentors, you obviously Stephen Batel was a mentor and you learned a lot from him. Were there other mentors that helped you along the way?
I have mentors that I read a lot and I listen to a lot of podcasts. And so I have a lot of mentors that I follow that I think are fabulous. My dad was a mentor. My dad was a great salesperson. He said, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You got to listen more than you speak. And my mom, with the Milwaukee Bucks, she did a lot of events, which today that buzzword is experiential. So I grew up, I was a special events person. My mom was in events, connecting people and giving people experiences in your world of business, whatever it is, entrepreneurial, the audience, whatever you're doing, you have to provide something that they remember.
Right.
It's not just a commodity selling a product. So my mom and dad were mentors for sure. Stephen for sure is a mentor.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So anything else you want to share before we go to the lightning round?
I think that's good.
Okay, good. So the lightning round is really, you'll get a chance to tell us about some of those podcasts and books that you like, because we just kind of hit on really quick answers just to finish off and tell us a little more about yourself. So let's start with, what is your favorite book?
My favorite book is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
Oh my gosh.
And do you know it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so
yeah.
So one of the mentors that I love is Jesse Itzler and Sarah Blakely. So they're married.
Yeah.
She started Spanx. He sold the jet company to Warren Buffett, and he did a book called Living with a Seal, where David Goggins moved into his house, and he started this thing called the Calendar Club Challenge, where you do something per day of the calendar, and he ran it. So he'd run 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles. This is Jesse. Like, I could never run. 20, 21, 22 miles. I could never do it. And then they're on social media, and his 10-year-old son, Laser, biked it. And I said, oh, I could bike that. And this is the year I turned 60. This was 3 years ago. And I'm like, I could bike that, 1 mile easy, 10 miles probably okay. I never really thought out into that last week where you're 21, 22, 23 miles biking every day. And if I didn't have David Goggins' book in my ear that last week, I wouldn't have finished.
Wow.
It's the most motivational book. I'm a huge reader. I probably read 2 to 3 books a month. It absolutely got me to finish those 496 miles on that bike in a month.
Wow.
Listening to him. I have so many books I love, but that one physically got me on that bike and got me riding those miles.
That's an amazing story. Yeah. And so for those who don't know, he's the pull-up. He held the pull-up record for like 1 day and did I forget how many thousands of pull-ups.
He ran marathons with broken toes.
And hundreds of miles.
Yeah, hundreds of miles on broken toes. I'm riding going, I can only, it's 25 miles. Like there's no way him in your ears, you'd give up.
Right.
Riding a bike in South Florida for 25. You're not going to give up. And I didn't.
That's great. So how about a song from from your youth, from when you're growing up in Flagler Beach?
Yeah, I think American Pie. My kids hate it when 7 minutes or 8 minutes, and I just belt it out, and they're like, "Oh,
yeah."
I love that song. I also love "Walking on Sunshine."
Yeah.
When I speak and they say, "What's your walk-up song?" I go, "Walking on Sunshine." Yeah. So that's I'm a happy person.
That's great. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
From my dad, listening. Listening is just powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And God gave you 2 ears. You're supposed to listen twice as much as you speak.
Great. Great advice. How about AI? Are you afraid of it or are you excited about it?
I'm so glad I'm 63. That's how I feel about it. I think my kids need to learn about it. I think it's going to help us medically, like in the medical world. So that does make me excited because I'm reading right now the book Outlive. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Peter,
yeah. So I think that we're going to move decades in advance on medical advancement because of AI. I think it's a little, when Elon Musk says it can, ruin the world, that's scary because I think Elon is one of the most brilliant people we have. And when he vocally and publicly says it could ruin our world, take a little bit of notice. Yeah. So I think it's both, but I'm really glad I'm 63 because if I was 33, I'd have to, really dive in and learn more about it.
Yeah.
Our kids really need to figure it out.
Exactly. Definitely. How about if you could have dinner with anyone living or dead, who would that be?
Besides my parents, I think it would be Oprah.
Ah.
Female, woman of color, had to overcome lots of odds, brilliant, multiple businesses. I'd like to have dinner with her.
That's a great one. Yeah. Incredible story. We got to get Oprah on.
I can't help you
work
there.
on that. Right. You get Oprah and we'll give you a bump in pay. What's something you're grateful for today?
My health. My dad passed away at 61, my mom at 70. I'm probably the strongest physically that I've been. It's a big priority for me, my health and my kids' health.
Yeah.
Health is, without health, you have nothing.
Who's someone you admire and why?
So I admire Sarah Blakely, the owner of Spanx, and the founder of Spanx, because she has 4 kids. She's married to Jesse, who's a crazy lunatic. She just sold the bill. She owned her company by herself without any fundraising forever and ever. No partners. Sold it for $1 billion. Half of it. Has crawled out on a plane wing with Richard Branson. The woman, and she's funny and humble, and her kids, again, this is what you see on social media, but they're so funny, and she gets on social media, no makeup, and just says, my husband is trying to put gas in an RV, and I'm crying with laughter. So I admire her because, to run $1 billion company and not get any partners and not raise any money and create a product that has, and she, her goal, I think when she was 16, she said, I want to create a product that will change the lives of people forever. And Spanx has changed the lives of women forever.
That's cool. How about a favorite movie?
There's so many. I'm a huge movie lover. I can't even pick one.
Okay, we won't put you. You want to just name a couple?
Sound of Music.
Oh, yeah.
I love. How Stella Got Her Groove Back, I think is super funny with Whoopi Goldberg. I love The Greek Wedding, which I just saw number 3 this past weekend. I like romance and funny movies.
Good. How about favorite restaurant?
Oh my gosh. So there's a restaurant in Coral Gables called Lotus Garden, and it's a Thai restaurant, and I love it. And I go there on my birthday. And it's just a hole in the wall, nothing. But I love the food.
Wow, that's a great one. We got to check that out. So you mentioned riding bikes, and what else you do and your health is important. What other things do you do to stay healthy and active?
I like pickleball. The trend of the day, right? Yeah. We did a lot of that during COVID. It's a great workout and fun. I walk with my dog 3 or 4 times a week, probably 5 to 6 miles. And I go to a trainer for strength.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so important as you read in Peter Attia's book, right? About how important resistance training is. So you obviously have a big social media presence because of the coaching you're doing. And so how can people get in touch with you and find out more about your coaching and how to learn how to lease up buildings?
So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and all under my name, Beth Azor.
That's awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much for being our guest today, Beth Azor. Great story.
Thanks, Keith. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for giving me a loan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in to Locality's Making Bank podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to catch the latest episodes, and visit localitybank.com today to learn more about all the benefits of banking local.